I never believed in ghosts. That is, until I moved to Hollow Creek. The name itself sends a shiver down your spine, right? Hollow Creek is a small, forgotten town with an eerie atmosphere and stories whispered from one neighbor to another. I didn't know any of this when I rented the old Victorian house on Maple Street. It was cheap, way too cheap for the stunning architecture and the sprawling garden that seemed to grow wild with each passing day. From the moment I stepped inside, I felt the weight of the house on my shoulders, a strange, unsettling pressure that didn't go away. But I brushed it off as the remnants of my life in the city, where everything was fast-paced and crowded. Here I could finally breathe, or so I thought. The first night, as I lay in bed, I heard it. A faint whisper, almost like a gentle breeze rustling through the trees outside. I convinced myself it was just the wind. I pulled the covers tighter around me and closed my eyes. But sleep didn't come. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, and my heart raced. I got up, my feet hitting the cold wooden floor, and stepped toward the sound. I reached the living room, where the moonlight cast shadows that danced across the walls. The whispers stopped. I stood there holding my breath, listening to the silence envelop me. Then a chill ran down my spine. I felt like I wasn't alone. The following day, I met my neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. She was a sprightly old woman with a weathered face and a curious twinkle in her eye. As we exchanged pleasantries, I couldn't help but ask about the house. "Oh dear, you've moved into the old Baker house," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of excitement and concern. "You know, the story goes that the last owner never left. They say her spirit still roams the halls." I chuckled nervously, brushing it off as just another local legend. But later that night, as I lay in bed, the whispers returned. They were louder now, more distinct. "Get out," they urged, a chorus of desperate voices. My heart raced as I sat up, my mind racing with questions. Why was this happening? Days turned into weeks, and the whispers persisted, growing more sinister. I tried to ignore them, attributing them to an overactive imagination fueled by late-night horror movies. But each time I brushed it off, it became harder to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One rainy night, as the wind howled outside, I was jolted awake by a loud crash. I leapt from my bed, heart pounding, and rushed to the source of the noise. The living room was in disarray, furniture overturned, picture frames smashed. I looked around, desperately seeking an explanation, but there was none. My mind raced, and for the first time I felt true fear. The next day, I sought comfort in the local library, hoping to uncover the history of the house and its previous occupants. What I found sent chills down my spine. Clara Baker, the last owner, had been a recluse. The townsfolk spoke of her strange behavior, her obsession with the occult. They claimed she had tried to summon spirits to communicate with her late husband. Then, one stormy night, she vanished without a trace, leaving the house to rot and decay. As I read through the old newspaper clippings, a sense of dread filled my chest. The last article reported strange occurrences in the house, objects moving on their own, whispers echoing in the night. Was this what I was experiencing? That night, I resolved to confront the whispers. I set up a makeshift seance in my living room, candles flickering around me as I called out to Clara. I needed answers. "Why are you here? What do you want?" My voice trembled, the words hanging in the air like a thick fog. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. Then, suddenly, a cold gust of wind extinguished the candles. I gasped, darkness swallowing the room. The whispers erupted into a cacophony of screams, filling my ears with terror. "Get out! Leave now!" they shrieked, echoing through my mind. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for my phone, trying to turn on the flashlight, but it flickered and died. I stumbled backward, my heart racing as the voices grew louder, more frantic. I needed to escape. In the dark, I dashed for the front door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I pounded on the wood, screaming for help, but the only response was the oppressive silence that followed. Then, I heard her, the voice of Clara Baker, sweet and sorrowful. "You cannot leave. You must stay." In that moment, I realized I was trapped, not just in the house, but in the grip of Clara's sorrow. She had lost everything, her husband, her sanity, and now she wanted me to understand her pain. I felt a strange empathy for her, a bond that tethered me to her spirit, but I also felt the fear growing inside me, gnawing at my resolve. With a surge of adrenaline, I recalled Mrs. Thompson's advice. Sometimes it's better to listen than to run. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Clara, I'm here. I'm listening." For a moment, the world around me fell silent. The whispers faded, and in the stillness, I felt a warmth envelop me. Clara's presence was no longer hostile but mournful. I saw flashes of her life, A beautiful wedding, laughter echoing through the halls, then darkness. In that vision, I understood. Clara was trapped in her memories, unable to move on, consumed by grief. I spoke to her softly. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here. Let go." The air shifted, a sense of peace washing over the room. Slowly, the door creaked open and I felt Clara's spirit lifting, a gentle sigh escaping her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, and the room filled with light. As the first rays of dawn broke through the windows, I stepped outside, the air fresh and invigorating. I had faced the darkness and emerged, but I knew I'd never forget Hollow Creek and the spirit that had changed my life. I left the house behind, its shadow fading in the distance, but the whispers of Clara Baker would always linger in my heart. Sometimes it takes a ghost to teach us about the fragility of life and the importance of letting go. Story the end.
Story number 2.
As I sit here, my heart racing, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. It's Halloween night, and the air outside is thick with the scent of decaying leaves and damp earth. My friends dared me to spend the night in my family's old house, a creaky 2-story relic that had been passed down through generations. They called it the Haunted House of Hollow Creek, but I always dismissed it as a silly myth. Until tonight. The moment I stepped through the door, the hinges groaned in protest and a chill wrapped around me. The house had a way of feeling alive, as if the walls held secrets of their own. I flicked on the flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, revealing peeling wallpaper and dust motes dancing like lost souls in the air. I set my sleeping bag in the living room, surrounded by faded photographs of ancestors I had never met. Their eyes seemed to follow me, filled with a sadness I couldn't comprehend. "Just an old house," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the unease. I reached for my phone, hoping to distract myself with some horror stories. I started scrolling through videos, the laughter of my friends echoing in my mind. The clock struck midnight, and a sudden chill swept through the room. The flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced on the walls. It was then that I heard it, a soft rustling from the attic above. My heart dropped, a cold weight settling in my stomach. I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper, like a soft breath against the silence. "Probably just the wind," I whispered to myself, though I didn't believe it. The wind didn't rustle in the attic. It howled through the trees outside. Curiosity tugged at me, pushing me to investigate. Armed with my flashlight, I climbed the narrow staircase to the attic, each creak of the stairs echoing like a warning. The attic door was slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. I hesitated for a moment, the whispers growing louder, calling me closer. I pushed the door open, and a cloud of dust erupted, swirling in the beam of my flashlight. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. The attic was filled with old trunks, cobwebs draped like ghostly shrouds, and the faint scent of mildew. I scanned the room, my flashlight illuminating the forgotten treasures. An old rocking chair, a broken mirror, and boxes filled with yellowed letters. But something was off. In the corner of the room, a shadow seemed to shift, darker than the surrounding darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to see through the shadows. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. The shadow remained still, as if waiting for something. My gut instinct screamed at me to leave, but curiosity held me captive. I stepped closer, the floor creaking under my weight. Suddenly, the shadow moved, darting across the room, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over an old trunk. My heart raced as I raised the flashlight, determined to uncover what lurked in the dark. But as the beam fell on the spot, nothing was there, just the old rocking chair, eerily still. I shook my head, dismissing it as my imagination. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. Just as I was about to turn back, I felt a chill creep down my spine, and the air grew thick, suffocating. My flashlight flickered again, and I heard it. A whisper, clearer now, echoing through the attic. "Help me." The words sent ice coursing through my veins. Panic surged, and I turned to leave, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. My heart pounded like a drum in my ears as I rattled the doorknob, my breath quickening. "Let me out, please!" I shouted, desperation clawing at my throat. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me, echoing my fear. "Help me! Help me!" It was a chorus of voices, each one more haunting than the last. I pressed my back against the door, feeling the cold wood beneath my palms. Just then, I heard footsteps above me, slow and deliberate. My heart raced. Someone, or something, was in the house. I mustered the courage to call out, "Who's there?" but the words felt weak against the onslaught of fear. The footsteps paused and the whispers fell silent. I could almost feel the weight of a gaze upon me. I glanced toward the corner where the shadow had moved, and to my horror, I saw a figure emerging from the darkness. It was a woman, dressed in tattered old-fashioned clothing, her hair long and tangled. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with hollow eyes that bore into my soul. "Help me," she rasped, reaching out with a bony hand. Her fingers stretched like a spider's legs. I froze, caught between flight and fear. "Please." They won't let me go. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I was rooted in place, paralyzed by the sorrowful gaze. "Who won't let you go?" I finally managed to whisper. She opened her mouth to answer, but a deafening crash echoed through the attic, startling me. I glanced at the door, which rattled violently as if something was trying to break in. My heart raced as I turned back to the ghostly figure. She was closer now, her expression twisted in anguish. "Help me," she cried again, desperation flooding her voice. In that moment, I knew I had to get out. I shoved against the door with all my strength and it flew open, nearly knocking me down as I stumbled into the hallway. Without looking back, I raced down the stairs, my breath ragged. I could still hear her voice echoing in my mind. "Help me." I burst through the front door, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I didn't stop running until I reached my friend's house, where they were still gathered, laughing and sharing ghost stories. As I recounted my experience, their laughter faded, and their eyes widened in disbelief. "You really think it's haunted?" one asked, half joking. But deep down, I knew the truth. The house held more than just memories. It held a restless spirit, trapped and longing for freedom. Every Halloween since, I've stayed away from that house, but sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I can still hear her whispering on the wind, "Help me."
Story number 3.
The last time I saw my hometown was just after I graduated high school. I couldn't wait to leave Lonesome Pines behind. Its small-town charm felt suffocating, the kind of place where everyone knew your business. But life has a way of pulling you back, and when my mother fell ill, I found myself returning to the only place I thought I'd escaped. Driving into town felt like stepping back in time. The streets were the same, lined with old oak trees that whispered secrets to the wind. The familiar sight of Lonesome Pines High School loomed ahead, and memories flooded back. Friends, laughter, and the infamous story of the Lonesome Pines ghost. According to legend, the ghost of a young girl named Clara roamed the woods outside of town. She had disappeared one fateful night, her laughter fading into the night air, never to be heard again. They say her spirit is bound to the woods, eternally searching for something she lost. I never believed in such tales, just another story to scare the kids, but that didn't stop the chill creeping up my spine as I drove past the trees. I moved back into my childhood home, which felt more like a museum of memories than a house. My mother was frail, her spirit dulled by illness, but she smiled when I walked in. "I'm glad you're here, sweetheart," she said, her voice barely a whisper. As the days turned into weeks, I took care of her, helping with chores and keeping her company. But there was something else lurking in the air, a heaviness that I couldn't shake. I found myself wandering the old woods during the day, seeking solace among the trees. But even in daylight, they felt oppressive, whispering secrets just out of reach. One evening, after my mother fell asleep, I decided to take a walk through the woods, drawn to their depths like a moth to a flame. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow that quickly faded into twilight. I felt a tug at my heart as I walked deeper, remembering the stories of Clara. Just a silly legend, I told myself, but the deeper I went, the more I felt Clara's presence. It was as if the trees were alive, watching me, waiting. I shivered, the chill of the evening air wrapping around me. Then I heard it, a soft giggle like a breeze through the branches. I froze, heart pounding. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. Silence enveloped me, thick and heavy. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it as my imagination. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Help me." The voice was faint, yet it echoed in my mind. I stepped cautiously forward, curiosity and fear battling within me. As I ventured deeper, the trees grew denser, and the laughter faded into soft sobs. "Clara?" I whispered, half expecting a ghostly figure to appear before me. "Is that you?" Suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing, and in the center stood a weathered tree, its trunk gnarled and twisted. Beneath it lay a pile of rocks, uneven and haphazardly stacked. The sobbing grew louder, and I felt an inexplicable urge to approach the tree. As I reached out to touch the trunk, a gust of wind whipped through the clearing, causing the leaves to rustle ominously. I pulled back, heart racing. "What do you want?" I shouted into the darkness, desperation clawing at my throat. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, a girl no older than 10, with wide, mournful eyes and a tattered dress. Her hair floated around her like a halo. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't find my way home." I stepped back, disbelief coursing through me. "Clara?" I gasped. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. "I've been lost for so long. I need to find my way home." An overwhelming sadness washed over me. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I was playing in the woods, and then it got dark. I couldn't find my way back," she said, her voice trailing off. "Now I can't leave." I looked around, the reality of her plight sinking in. Clara was trapped, bound to this place, forever searching for a way home. "What can I do?" I asked, my heart aching for her. "Help me find my necklace," she said, her eyes pleading. "I lost it when I fell." My mind raced. I remembered hearing stories about how Clara had been playing near the old creek the night she disappeared. I had to help her. "Okay, I'll find it. Where should I look?" "Near the creek," she said, pointing into the darkness. "But hurry. It's almost too late." With a determination I didn't know I possessed, I dashed through the woods, my heart pounding. The branches clawed at me, the shadows whispered warnings, but I pressed on. As I reached the creek, I scanned the ground, searching desperately for any sign of Clara's necklace. Moonlight danced on the water's surface, illuminating the area. Suddenly, something glimmered in the mud. I bent down, heart racing, and pulled out a delicate silver necklace with a small locket. My breath caught in my throat. I held it up, feeling the weight of Clara's sadness. "Clara!" I called, sprinting back through the trees. The wind howled around me, the forest alive with whispers of encouragement and warnings. When I reached the clearing, Clara stood waiting, her eyes wide with hope. "I found it!" I gasped, holding out the necklace. She reached for it, her small hands trembling. As soon as the necklace touched her fingers, a brilliant light enveloped her, illuminating the entire clearing. "Thank you," she exclaimed, her voice ringing like a chime. "Now I can go home." The light expanded, wrapping around her as she smiled, finally at peace. I watched in awe as the shadows began to dissipate, her figure glowing brighter until it faded into the night. I stood there, heart racing, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. Clara was free. As the darkness melted away, the forest felt lighter, the oppressive air replaced with a gentle breeze. As I made my way back home, I knew Lonesome Pines would never be the same for me. I had faced the unknown, confronted the echoes of the past, and helped a lost spirit find her way home. The stories of Lonesome Pines had a new chapter now, a tale of hope, redemption, and the courage to face the darkness. And as I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of peace. The whispers of the woods had quieted, replaced by the soft lullaby of the wind through the trees. Story the end.
Story number 4.
I've always been drawn to the supernatural. Ghost stories, haunted houses, and tales of restless spirits fascinated me. So when I heard about Blackwood Manor, an abandoned estate just outside town with a notorious reputation, I couldn't resist the urge to explore it. The locals whispered about the dark history of the manor, claiming it was cursed. They said the shadows that lurked within its walls had claimed many who dared to enter. On a crisp autumn evening, fueled by curiosity and the thrill of adventure, I grabbed my flashlight and set off toward Blackwood Manor. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the overgrown path leading to the estate. The air grew thick with anticipation as I approached the looming structure, its once grand facade now a haunting silhouette against the darkening sky. Pushing open the creaking door, I stepped inside. The smell of dampness and decay filled my nostrils, and the sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty halls. Cobwebs draped the corners, and dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. Every creak of the floorboards set my nerves on edge, but I pressed forward, determined to uncover the secrets of Blackwood Manor. As I explored, I stumbled upon a grand staircase, its banister carved with intricate designs. I felt an overwhelming urge to climb, drawn to the upper floors. Each step felt like a journey deeper into a forgotten world. The second floor was dimly lit, with doors lining the corridor, their paint peeling and hinges rusted. I cautiously opened the first door and stepped into a room frozen in time, a dusty nursery, filled with old toys and a rocking chair that swayed slightly, as if someone had just been sitting in it. A chill ran down my spine. "Just the wind," I muttered, trying to reassure myself. But deep down, I sensed that I was not alone. I left the nursery, my heart racing, and continued down the hall. The next door led to a bedroom, the sheets still rumpled as if someone had just gotten up. On the dresser, a cracked mirror reflected my anxious expression. As I stepped closer, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned abruptly, but there was nothing there. Only the darkness closing in around me. I shook off the feeling and pushed open another door at the end of the hallway. This one led to a small study, and as I stepped inside, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight for a brief moment. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the switch, the darkness enveloping me. Finally, the beam flickered back to life, revealing a dusty old journal resting on the desk. Curiosity piqued. I picked it up and began to read. The journal belonged to Lady Evelyn Blackwood, the last resident of the manor. Her entries spoke of strange occurrences, objects moving on their own, whispers echoing in the night, and shadows creeping along the walls. The further I read, the more I felt a connection to her, as if her spirit was trying to reach out to me. The last entry sent a shiver down my spine. I can feel them growing stronger. I fear I will not be able to escape their grasp. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper behind me. "Help me." The voice was soft, almost pleading. I turned quickly, shining my flashlight into the dark corners of the room, but there was no one there. My heart raced as the weight of dread settled on my chest. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. I set the journal down and stepped back, my instincts screaming at me to leave. But just as I turned to go, I felt a cold breeze wash over me, and the door slammed shut with a deafening bang. I jumped back, fear coursing through my veins. I pulled on the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. "Let me out!" I shouted, pounding on the door. The whisper returned, louder this time. "Help me, please." The sound of my own heartbeat thundered in my ears as I backed away from the door. The shadows in the corners seemed to deepen, swirling around me like a living thing. I turned and frantically searched for another way out, my mind racing. That's when I noticed a faint glow coming from the fireplace. I moved toward it, my pulse quickening. As I approached, I could see a small object lying in the ashes, a locket, tarnished but still beautiful. I reached down to pick it up, and the moment my fingers touched it, the room was filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, I found myself standing in the same study, but everything was different. The furniture was restored, the walls freshly painted, and sunlight streamed through the windows. I blinked, disoriented, and looked around, my heart pounding. "Lady Evelyn?" I called out, my voice echoing in the newly brightened room. To my astonishment, a figure appeared before me, a woman in a flowing white dress, her face pale but serene. "You found it," she whispered, her voice soft and melodic. "Your locket?" I asked, still trying to grasp what was happening. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you for freeing me. I was trapped here, bound to this manor by the shadows that sought to consume me." A surge of empathy washed over me. "What can I do to help you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Tell my story," she implored, her voice trembling. "Let the world know I was not alone, that I fought against the darkness." Before I could respond, the shadows in the corners of the room began to twist and writhe, growing darker and more aggressive. "No," I screamed, taking a step back. "You have to stay!" "Promise me," she said urgently, "that you will remember me. The shadows will never stop trying to claim this place. You must leave now." With a flash, the room began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back. "I promise," I yelled, my voice barely escaping the growing darkness. In an instant, I was back in the dim study, the locket still clutched in my hand. The door swung open, and I stumbled out, the air heavy with the lingering presence of Lady Evelyn. I ran down the hall, heart pounding, not daring to look back. I burst through the front door and out into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The manor loomed behind me, dark and foreboding, but I felt a strange sense of relief. The shadows no longer felt as oppressive. I turned and took one last look at Blackwood Manor, the weight of its history heavy in my chest. As I drove away, I knew I had to tell her story. Lady Evelyn Blackwood deserved to be remembered, not as a ghost bound to her past, but as a woman who fought against the darkness. The legends of Blackwood Manor would change, and in time, perhaps the shadows would finally fade. Story the end.
Story number 5.
I never believed in superstitions. Growing up in a small town with its share of ghost stories, I found them entertaining but hardly credible. However, when my grandmother passed away and left me her antique mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about it. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones about the mirror of lost souls, claiming it trapped the spirits of those who looked into it, drawing them in until they were lost forever. I brushed off their warnings as mere folklore. After all, it was just a mirror, right? I hung it in my bedroom, its ornate frame reflecting the room in a way that added an odd elegance. But the more I stared into it, the more I felt like I was looking at something otherworldly. The first few nights, I noticed strange things. The shadows in the mirror seemed to move independently of me, swirling in the corners like wisps of smoke. I dismissed it as fatigue and the play of light, but unease grew in the pit of my stomach. One evening, I sat on my bed flipping through old family photos when I noticed something odd in the mirror's reflection. Behind me, in the corner of my room, I saw a fleeting figure, a shadowy outline of a girl. I spun around, heart racing, but there was nothing there, just the stillness of my room. I shuddered and turned back to the mirror, but the figure had vanished. Over the next few weeks, I started to have vivid dreams. Each night, the same girl appeared, her face pale and her eyes wide with a haunting sorrow. She reached out to me, but no sound escaped her lips. I woke up gasping, the weight of her despair pressing on my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying to tell me something, and the mirror was the key. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I began researching the mirror's history. I learned that it once belonged to a wealthy family in the early 1900s whose daughter had mysteriously disappeared. The townsfolk claimed she had been seen looking into the mirror the night before her vanishing. Some believed her spirit was trapped within it, searching for a way to escape. One night, overwhelmed by the girl's presence in my dreams, I decided to confront the mirror. I stood before it, my heart pounding. "Who are you?" I demanded, staring at my reflection. The air grew heavy, charged with energy. "Help me," a voice whispered, soft yet desperate. I flinched, eyes widening as I realized it wasn't my own voice echoing back. I leaned closer, my breath fogging the glass. "What do you want?" "I'm trapped," the voice continued, filled with anguish. "You must find me." Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, and the mirror's surface rippled like water. I stepped back, terrified, but I couldn't look away. The girl's face materialized within the glass, her expression pleading, "Please, help me." Before I could react, the mirror pulled me in, dragging me into its depths. I felt myself falling, a sensation like being submerged in icy water. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a dimly lit room, filled with dust and shadows. The air was thick with despair, and the girl stood before me, looking just as she did in my dreams. "Where am I?" I gasped, glancing around. "What is this place?" "This is my prison," she said, her voice echoing with sadness. "I was lost when I looked into the mirror, and now I cannot escape." "Why did you choose me?" I asked, bewildered. "Because you can help me find my way home," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You must uncover the truth of my disappearance. Only then can we both be free." Feeling an overwhelming sense of determination, I asked, "How do I do that?" The girl pointed toward a dusty old trunk in the corner of the room. "Inside, you will find the answers. But be careful. The shadows will try to stop you." I approached the trunk, heart pounding, and opened it. Inside were old letters, photographs, and a small diary that belonged to the girl. As I sifted through the contents, I uncovered a dark secret. The girl, named Amelia, had been entangled in a web of jealousy and betrayal. Her family had forbidden her to see a boy from a poor family, but she had continued to meet him in secret. The last entry in her diary sent chills down my spine. It spoke of a confrontation with her parents, her desperate plea for freedom, and how she'd run to the mirror to escape their grasp. The shadows that lurked in her home had taken advantage of her despair, pulling her into the mirror and trapping her soul. Suddenly, the shadows in the room began to swirl, growing darker and more menacing. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed, their voices a cacophony of anger and sorrow. I could feel their cold breath on my skin, and fear surged through me. "No," I shouted, clutching Amelia's diary. "You can't take us!" "Help me," Amelia cried, reaching for me as the shadows closed in. I knew I had to act quickly. "Amelia, I'll help you, but you have to trust me," I yelled over the growing storm. I could feel the darkness pressing in, threatening to engulf us both. "Read the words," she urged, her voice barely audible above the chaos. With shaking hands, I opened the diary and began to read aloud the final passage, invoking the love that had once connected Amelia to her boy. The shadows shrieked in rage, swirling around us like a tempest, but I pressed on, pouring every ounce of strength into my voice. As I read, the shadows recoiled, their power wavering. I felt a surge of light flood the room, illuminating the darkness and revealing the truth that had bound Amelia for so long. The figures of her parents appeared, their faces twisted in regret, and the boy stood beside them, reaching for Amelia with longing in his eyes. "Amelia," he cried, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." With one final shout of her name, the shadows shattered like glass, releasing a blinding light that enveloped us. I felt myself being pulled back, the world around me spinning. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my bedroom, gasping for breath, the mirror reflecting my startled expression. I turned to see the locket Amelia had worn lying on my bed, glimmering in the light. The mirror was still, its surface calm, but the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. As I stared into the glass, I felt a warmth wash over me, a sense of peace and gratitude. Amelia was free now, her spirit released from the torment of the shadows. I promised to share her story to ensure her name would not be forgotten. From that day on, I looked at the mirror differently. It was no longer a mere reflection of my room, but a vessel of history and emotion. I knew the tales of lost souls were more than just stories. They were echoes of lives once lived, waiting for someone to listen.
Story number 6.
It was Halloween night, and I found myself alone in my grandmother's old cabin on the edge of Black Hollow Woods. My friends had dared me to spend the night here, claiming the forest was haunted by the spirits of those who had been lost within its depths. I scoffed at their superstitions, but as I settled in, the weight of the night hung heavy around me. The cabin creaked with the whispers of the past, and the flickering candles cast eerie shadows on the walls. My phone was dead, and the only sounds were the rustling leaves outside and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. I wrapped myself in a blanket, trying to shake off the feeling that I was being watched. As the clock struck midnight, a cold draft swept through the room. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, glancing toward the window. The moon was full, casting an otherworldly glow over the woods. That's when I heard it, a soft, melodic humming drifting through the air. My heart raced. It was faint but distinct, like someone was singing a lullaby just outside. Curiosity pulled me from my blanket, and I crept toward the door, feeling the chill of the night seep into my bones. I stepped outside, the grass wet beneath my bare feet, and followed the sound into the woods. The trees loomed over me like ancient sentinels, their branches twisted and gnarled, but the melody called me deeper. The path was barely visible, overgrown with weeds and vines, but I pressed on. The humming grew louder, weaving through the trees, a haunting lullaby that both comforted and terrified me. "Just a trick of the wind," I whispered, trying to convince myself to turn back. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to find its source. I stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight, and in its center stood a figure, a woman in a flowing white dress, her long hair cascading down her back. She swayed gently, lost in her song, her eyes closed as if in a trance. "Who are you?" I called, my voice trembling. The song stopped abruptly, and she opened her eyes, revealing depths of sorrow that sent shivers down my spine. "I am the keeper of these woods," she said, her voice soft but echoing with an otherworldly resonance. "You shouldn't have come here." My heart raced as she took a step toward me, the air thickening with an unseen tension. "They say the woods are cursed," I stammered. "What does that mean?" The woman sighed, a sound like the rustling of leaves in the wind. "Long ago, a terrible darkness fell upon this land. Those who wandered into the woods never returned. Their souls were trapped, bound to the forest, unable to find peace." A cold sweat broke out across my brow. "What do you mean? Is that why you're here?" "I was one of them," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I was lost, and now I guard the entrance. But the curse has not faded. It has only grown stronger. Every Halloween, more souls are drawn to the woods, lured by the melody, destined to join the restless." I felt a tremor of fear run through me. "But I'm not lost. I just wanted to see." "It's too late," she interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "The forest has chosen you." Before I could respond, shadows flitted through the trees, dark figures emerging from the underbrush. They moved silently, their forms indistinct but menacing. The woman stepped back, her expression shifting to one of fear. "You must leave now." I turned to run, panic surging through me as I sprinted back the way I came. The shadows followed, whispering in a language I couldn't understand, their voices rising in a chorus that drowned out my own frantic breaths. I could hear their footsteps behind me, a cacophony of echoes that seemed to grow louder with each step. Branches snagged at my clothes as I pushed through the underbrush, the cold air biting at my skin. I glanced back and saw the woman, standing still in the moonlight, her expression a mix of sorrow and urgency. "You have to break the curse," she called, her voice barely reaching me through the dark. "Find the heart of the woods." What did she mean? I had no time to ponder her words. I stumbled, falling to the ground, the breath knocked out of me. The shadows closed in, their whispers escalating to a frantic crescendo. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline propelling me forward, and I finally burst back into the clearing around the cabin. Slamming the door behind me, I leaned against it, my heart racing, struggling to catch my breath. The cabin felt safe, but I knew it was only temporary. The shadows were still out there, lurking, waiting for me to make a mistake. I had to find the heart of the woods. The woman's warning echoed in my mind. I grabbed my flashlight, knowing I couldn't stay hidden forever. I stepped back outside, the cold air biting at my skin, and made my way deeper into the forest, guided only by the light. As I ventured further, the atmosphere shifted. The trees seemed to close in, the air growing heavier with every step. Eventually, I came upon a large oak tree in the center of a small clearing. Its gnarled roots twisted into the ground like the fingers of a giant, and at its base lay a stone altar covered in moss. I felt a strange pull towards it, and as I approached, the whispers returned, this time clearer. "Offer your heart," they chanted, a haunting melody that resonated deep within me. "Free us." I hesitated, fear gripping my heart. But the shadows encroached upon me, and I knew I had to act. Kneeling before the altar, I took a deep breath and closed my eyes, focusing on the warmth of my heart. "I'm here to help," I whispered, unsure of what would happen next. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the altar, illuminating the clearing and casting the shadows back into the darkness. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, and I could see the shapes of the lost souls swirling around me, their faces twisted in anguish. I reached out, the warmth of my heart spilling forth, enveloping them in light. One by one, the souls began to fade, their whispers turning from cries of despair to sounds of gratitude. The darkness that had bound them dissipated, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. When the last soul vanished, the light dimmed, leaving only the oak tree standing silently in the clearing. Breathing heavily, I stumbled back, my heart racing. The curse had been broken, but I could still feel the remnants of their sorrow lingering in the air. I turned to leave, eager to escape the woods, but as I did, I glanced back at the tree. The woman stood there, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You freed them," she said, her voice a gentle breeze. "And now, you are free to go." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I hurried back to the cabin, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I packed my things quickly, ready to leave Black Hollow Woods behind. As I drove away, I glanced back at the dark silhouette of the forest, a mix of fear and wonder swelling in my chest. I would never forget the haunting lullaby, the shadows, or the woman who had been bound to the woods, but for now I was free. Story the end.
Story number 7.
There's a place not far from my town called the Whispering Woods. No one goes there after dark, and even during the day, most people give it a wide berth. The trees are twisted and ancient, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. They say the woods have a mind of their own, whispering secrets to those who dare to listen. But I, being the skeptic I am, brushed aside the warnings as mere tales meant to scare children. It was a chilly autumn afternoon when my friends dared me to venture into the woods. "You're not scared, are you?" they taunted. I laughed it off, determined to prove my bravery. Armed with nothing but my flashlight and a stubborn attitude, I set off toward the woods, feeling the weight of their stares on my back. As I stepped into the forest, the air grew colder. The sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. It felt like stepping into another world, one that had long been forgotten. The first few minutes were uneventful, just the crunch of leaves beneath my feet and the distant call of birds. But as I ventured deeper, an unsettling silence enveloped me. The usual sounds of the forest faded away, leaving only the sound of my own breathing. Then I heard it, a faint whispering, like the rustling of leaves, but more distinct, more deliberate. I paused, straining to hear. "Come closer." The voices seemed to beckon, soft and melodic, yet tinged with something darker. "Join us." "Hello?" I called out, my voice breaking the heavy silence. "Is anyone there?" No response came, only the rustling sound growing louder, wrapping around me like a shroud. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. "It's just the wind," I muttered, though my heart raced in my chest. But curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed on. As I walked, the whispers morphed into fragmented phrases, swirling around me like a haunting melody. "Lost, forever, find us." I felt a chill run down my spine, but I couldn't turn back. The air felt charged, and an inexplicable pull urged me to continue. I stumbled upon a clearing where the trees parted to reveal a circle of smooth stones, ancient and worn. In the center stood a large, gnarled tree with a hollow trunk, its bark twisted in unsettling shapes. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a tempest. "Help us! It's been so long. What do you want?" I shouted, trying to mask my fear with bravado. "I'm not afraid of you." But the whispers only grew louder, almost mocking me. I felt a strange compulsion to approach the tree, to look inside the hollow trunk. The air felt heavy with anticipation as I knelt down, peering into the darkness. Inside, I found a small, dusty journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. I opened it, and a chill ran down my spine as I read the first entry. The woods are alive. They speak to us, whispering secrets of the past. We must listen, but at what cost? As I flipped through the pages, the entries grew darker. They spoke of a group of friends who had come to the woods, drawn by the same whispers I had heard. They had followed the voices deep into the forest, lured by promises of adventure and discovery. But as they ventured further, one by one they disappeared. The woods claimed them, the last entry concluded, and now I fear they will claim me too. Panic surged through me as I realized the gravity of what I was reading. I could almost feel the shadows creeping in, the whispers growing more insistent. Leave while you still can. Help us. Don't let the darkness take you. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me. I stumbled back, heart pounding, as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. The trees around me seemed to sway, their branches twisting like arms reaching out to grab me. I knew I had to escape. Just as I turned to run, the hollow trunk of the tree emitted a soft glow, illuminating the clearing with an eerie light. In that moment, I saw them. Ghostly figures emerging from the shadows, their faces twisted in despair. They reached out to me, their mouths moving in silent screams, their eyes pleading. "Help us!" they cried, their voices merging into a cacophony of sorrow. I felt their anguish wash over me, paralyzing me with fear. I realized these were the lost souls, the friends who had ventured into the woods long ago and never returned. They were trapped, their spirits bound to the whispering woods. "No, this can't be happening," I shouted, backing away as the shadows closed in. The forest seemed alive, pulsating with an energy that threatened to consume me. I gripped the journal tightly, recalling the last entry's warning. "The woods are alive," I whispered, feeling the truth sink in. The forest fed on fear, on despair. It thrived on those who dared to enter, trapping them in its embrace. With newfound determination, I began to chant the words from the journal, hoping to break the spell that bound them. "You are not alone. I hear you. I will remember you." The figures hesitated, their eyes lighting up with a glimmer of hope. The whispers softened, transforming from menacing to almost soothing. "Help us find peace. Help us be free." I felt a surge of energy course through me as I continued to chant, the air around me vibrating with a strange resonance. The shadows retreated and the figures began to shimmer, their forms becoming clearer. One by one they stepped closer, their faces now calm and serene. "Thank you," one of them said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have given us hope." Suddenly, the hollow tree glowed brighter, and the ground trembled again. The whispers transformed into a harmonious melody, swirling around me like a warm embrace. I could feel the spirits lifting, breaking free from the chains that had bound them for so long. The last thing I remember was the overwhelming light, enveloping me and the clearing in a warm glow. I felt the weight of the forest lift, the whispers fading into silence. When I awoke, I was lying at the edge of the woods, the sun setting behind the trees. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing as I looked around. The whispering woods were just that, silent now, their secrets buried in the shadows. I stumbled back home, my heart still racing, but a sense of calm settled within me. I had faced the darkness and helped the lost souls find their way. The woods would no longer be a place of fear. They were now a sanctuary of peace. As I reached my town, I promised to share their story, to ensure the whispering woods were remembered, not for their darkness, but for the souls they had sheltered and the bravery it took to bring them home. Story the end.
Story number 8.
Believed in ghosts. Not until that fateful Halloween night when I found myself alone in my parents' old house. After years of neglect, it stood as a decaying monument to memories long past. My parents had moved out a few months ago, and I had decided to spend Halloween there, planning to clean it up and prepare it for sale. Little did I know, I was about to uncover a chilling family secret. As I stepped through the creaky front door, an unsettling chill swept through me. Dust motes floated in the beam of my flashlight, and the stale air smelled of mildew and forgotten dreams. I switched on the overhead lights, but the flickering bulbs only added to the unease that settled in my stomach. The house was filled with remnants of my childhood, old toys, faded photographs, and furniture draped in white sheets. But there was one thing that always unnerved me, the large portrait hanging in the hallway. It depicted a woman in a long, elegant dress, her piercing blue eyes staring directly at you. She was my great-great-grandmother, Clara, who was said to have mysteriously vanished one night over a century ago. The family whispered of a curse, a darkness that surrounded her disappearance, and I always felt an unsettling connection to the portrait. After gathering some supplies, I decided to tackle the dust-covered living room first. Hours passed as I worked, and the sunlight began to fade outside, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Just as I finished sweeping, I heard a soft thump from the hallway. I paused, heart racing, and glanced toward the portrait. Just the house settling, I told myself, but unease gnawed at my mind. I shook it off and continued cleaning. As I moved to the kitchen, the thumping returned, more insistent this time. It sounded like a rhythmic tapping, echoing through the silence. Against my better judgment, I walked toward the hallway. The air felt heavier here, charged with a presence I couldn't explain. I approached the portrait, my heartbeat loud in my ears. The woman's expression seemed to shift, her eyes glinting as if alive. I could have sworn she smiled, but I blinked and it was gone. "Get a grip," I muttered, stepping back. I turned to leave, but as I did, the tapping grew louder, now accompanied by a faint whisper that seemed to weave through the air. I pressed my back against the wall, frozen in place. "Help me." The voice was barely audible, as if carried by the wind, but it sent chills down my spine. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but curiosity held me captive. I took a deep breath and reached out to touch the frame of the portrait. The moment my fingers made contact, the tapping stopped. An icy breeze swept through the hallway and extinguishing the overhead lights, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged, and I fumbled for my flashlight, its beam cutting through the pitch black. In the faint glow, I saw it. The portrait had changed. The woman's face was twisted in anguish, her once calm eyes now wide with terror. "You must listen," she seemed to say, though her lips never moved. "Clara?" I whispered, unsure of what to think. I backed away, heart pounding, but the walls felt alive, closing in around me. "What do you want?" I called, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. "Help me." The voice echoed again, louder this time, reverberating through the house. My pulse quickened as I realized the whispers were coming from the portrait itself. Desperation filled my chest. I wanted to run, but I felt an inexplicable pull toward her. "Okay, I'll help you." I shouted into the darkness, the words spilling from my lips before I could stop myself. The air around me thickened, and suddenly the room was filled with a cacophony of whispers, each one urging me to find the truth. Before I could process what was happening, a chill enveloped me, and the portrait flickered like an old film reel. In a flash, the hallway around me transformed, and I found myself standing in a dimly lit room, the air thick with tension. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, and a flickering candle cast eerie shadows. I recognized the room from family stories, Clara's old study. My heart raced as I took in the scene. In the corner stood a wooden desk cluttered with yellowed papers and a small diary. The whispers grew louder, beckoning me to approach. I walked over, the candlelight illuminating the pages of the diary. Clara's elegant handwriting filled the pages, her words echoing with despair. She spoke of a dark presence that haunted the house, of nights spent in fear, and of a family curse that consumed those who tried to uncover the truth. With trembling hands, I turned the pages until one caught my eye. A detailed account of her last night before she vanished. She wrote about a man, a shadowy figure who had appeared at her window, whispering promises of freedom. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the implications. Clara had been lured by something dark, something that had stolen her away. As I absorbed her words, the shadows in the room shifted, and the atmosphere grew heavy with an unseen weight. The whispers crescendoed into a frantic plea. "You must stop him! Break the curse!" I felt a surge of determination. I needed to find a way to free Clara's spirit and those trapped with her. I scanned the room for something, anything that could help. In the far corner, I spotted a small, ornate box partially hidden under a pile of dust. I rushed over and opened it, revealing a locket with Clara's picture inside. The moment I touched it, a wave of energy surged through me. The whispers faded to a soft hum, and I understood. I had to return the locket to the portrait. With the locket clutched in my hand, I found myself back in the hallway, the portrait waiting expectantly. I approached it, the air crackling with tension, and placed the locket on the wooden frame. "Clara, I'm here to help you," I cried. The portrait shimmered, the darkness swirling around it. The woman's face shifted again, this time a mixture of hope and relief. "Thank you," she breathed, and the whispers grew softer, fading into a gentle breeze. As the locket settled into place, a blinding light erupted from the portrait, enveloping the hallway in warmth. The shadows receded, and I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Clara's anguished expression transformed into a serene smile, and the house felt lighter, free from the weight of its dark history. Suddenly, the room fell silent. I stood there, heart racing, knowing that I had helped release Clara and countless others from their torment. The portrait was just a portrait again, no longer a doorway to despair, but a testament to the past. With a newfound sense of closure, I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp Halloween air. The moon shone brightly above, illuminating the path ahead. I knew I would always remember that night, the night I confronted the darkness and found a way to free a lost soul. As I drove away from the house, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The cabin stood quiet and still, but I felt a sense of peace, knowing that Clara was finally free. Story the end.
Story number 9.
I had always been drawn to the eerie allure of abandoned places, but there was something particularly haunting about Willow Creek Asylum. Legend had it that the spirits of the patients lingered there, trapped in a cycle of pain and despair. On Halloween night, I decided to explore the asylum, lured by the thrill of uncovering its dark secrets. As I approached the crumbling stone building, the moon hung low in the sky, casting a pale light that danced through the trees. The air was heavy with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath my feet. The gate creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the sound echoing into the void beyond. Stepping inside, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The hallway was lined with peeling wallpaper and broken windows, their glass shattered like the dreams of those who once roamed these halls. I flicked on my flashlight, its beam flickering across the dusty floor, revealing the remnants of a bygone era, rusty gurneys, abandoned wheelchairs, and the faint scent of decay. The stories I had heard echoed in my mind. Whispers of experiments gone wrong, patients left to suffer in isolation, and the dark figure of a nurse who was said to roam the halls at night. I shook my head, trying to dispel the fear creeping in. I was here to investigate, to capture evidence of the paranormal. As I ventured deeper into the asylum, I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the nearby room. My heart raced as I pushed open the door, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, I found a small common room filled with scattered toys and tattered books. The sight was heartbreaking, a stark reminder of lives interrupted. Then I saw it. In the corner of the room stood an old doll, its porcelain face cracked and its eyes staring blankly at me. I couldn't help but feel that it was watching me, judging my presence in this forsaken place. I stepped closer, reaching out to pick it up when suddenly the door slammed shut behind me. Startled, I turned, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me as I rattled the handle, my breath quickening. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I shouted, my voice echoing against the cold walls. The only response was the oppressive silence that swallowed my words. I felt a sudden drop in temperature, and an icy breeze swept through the room, raising the hairs on my arms. Then I heard it, a soft melodic humming, almost like a lullaby, drifting through the air. It was a sound so hauntingly beautiful that it made my heart ache. I glanced around, but I was still alone. "Get it together," I murmured to myself, forcing calm into my voice. I turned back to the doll, picking it up, and that's when I noticed something strange, a small latch at the back of its head. With a trembling hand, I opened it, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a tiny, folded piece of paper. I carefully unfolded the note, revealing a child's scrawl, "Help me. I'm lost." My heart sank as the humming grew louder, wrapping around me like a shroud. It was as if the very walls were alive, resonating with the sorrow of those who had suffered here. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting unsettling shadows across the room. The humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a chorus of whispers that filled the air. "Help us, help us." The voices were layered, desperate, and filled with longing. I pressed my back against the wall, gripping the doll tightly as fear coursed through me. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice shaky but firm. The whispers grew louder, surrounding me. "Help us, free us." Realization hit me like a jolt. The spirits were trapped here, yearning for release. I thought back to the stories I'd heard about the asylum, the experiments conducted on patients who had been deemed unfit for society. My heart raced. I had to find a way to help them. I took a deep breath and called out, "I want to help you. What do I need to do?" The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. Then a single voice broke through the silence, a soft, childlike whisper. "Find the heart." "Where is it?" I asked, urgency creeping into my tone. "Please show me." The room grew colder, and the doll in my hands felt alive. its gaze suddenly intense. I looked around, desperate for a clue. Then I noticed a faint glow emanating from the hallway beyond the common room. Without hesitation, I dashed for the door, still locked but now swinging open as if inviting me forward. I stepped into the corridor, my flashlight beam flickering as I followed the light. The whispers guided me, echoing through the halls like a ghostly symphony. I turned corner after corner, my heart pounding in my chest. The glow intensified, leading me to a large, rusted door at the end of the hall. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, and at its center stood an old wooden chest adorned with intricate carvings. A sense of dread washed over me, but I knew I had to look inside. I approached the chest, feeling the weight of countless souls behind me, urging me forward. I knelt beside the chest and opened it slowly. Inside, I found a collection of old, yellowed letters tied together with a fraying ribbon. Each letter was filled with the despair of those who had been imprisoned within these walls, their words dripping with sorrow and longing for freedom. But one letter caught my eye. It was different from the others, its paper smooth and untouched. I unfolded it, my heart racing as I read the words, "Find me where the light never fades. Break the curse and set us free." I glanced around the room, my mind racing. Where could that be? Suddenly I remembered the doll I had found earlier. In my hands I held its head, the tiny latch still unfastened. I opened it again, and to my astonishment, I found a small key hidden inside. With newfound determination, I looked around for something that might be locked. My gaze fell on a small door hidden behind the chest, its surface covered in dust. I hurried over, inserting the key into the lock. With a click, the door swung open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. With my heart pounding, I descended the steps, the air growing colder with each step. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. At the bottom, I entered a small chamber, its walls lined with faded photographs of the asylum's former patients. In the center of the room stood an old lantern, its light flickering as if fighting against the darkness. I rushed over, sensing its importance. As I reached for the lantern, the whispers crescendoed into a frantic plea. "Light the way! Set us free!" I grabbed the lantern and searched for something to light it. My fingers brushed against a box of matches on a nearby table. I struck one and watched as the flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow that chased away the shadows. As I held the lantern high, the whispers transformed into a chorus of gratitude. The room brightened, and the air felt lighter, filled with warmth and hope. The photographs glowed, the faces of the patients smiling back at me as if thanking me for my courage. Suddenly, a powerful wind swept through the chamber, swirling around me, lifting the lantern higher. The light radiated out, breaking through the darkness that had consumed the asylum for so long. The voices rose in a crescendo, and I could see the spirits of the patients emerging from the walls, their forms becoming more defined, their faces filled with peace. "Thank you," they cried, their voices ringing through the air like a joyful melody. One figure stepped forward, a young girl with wide eyes and a radiant smile. "You've freed us." With those words, the lantern's light expanded, illuminating the entire chamber. The walls shimmered, and in a flash of brilliant light, the spirits were lifted from their earthly bonds, rising into the night sky like fireflies escaping a jar. As the last whisper faded, I found myself standing alone in the now empty chamber, the lantern glowing softly in my hands. I had done it. I had broken the curse and freed the souls of Willow Creek Asylum. With a sense of relief washing over me, I turned to leave. As I ascended the staircase, the atmosphere felt different, lighter, freer. I stepped outside, breathing in the crisp night air, knowing that the asylum's dark legacy had been lifted. I glanced back at the building, now bathed in the soft glow of the moonlight, its shadowy form no longer ominous, but serene. Willow Creek was finally at peace. That Halloween night, I learned that some places are haunted not just by the past, but by the hope of finding freedom. And sometimes the courage to confront the darkness is all it takes to bring light back into the world. Story the end.
Story number 10.
The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I approached Blackwood Manor, a sprawling estate long abandoned. I had heard the stories, the chilling tales whispered among the townsfolk. They said the manor was cursed, haunted by the ghost of Lady Evelyn Blackwood, who had vanished on a stormy night a century ago. As a paranormal investigator, I was drawn to its haunting allure and determined to uncover the truth. As I stepped through the massive, creaking doors, a shiver ran down my spine. The air inside was thick with dust, and the scent of mold and decay hung heavily. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing grand but faded furnishings, cobwebs draping the chandeliers like ghostly veils. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I set up my equipment in the foyer, the only light coming from the flickering flashlight and my camera's display. I hoped to capture evidence of the supernatural. As I adjusted the settings, I heard a soft sound behind me, a faint whispering, like the rustle of silk. I turned quickly, but there was nothing, just the echo of the manor's silence. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing eerily in the vastness. No response. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I walked deeper into the manor, each step a reminder of the stories that had drawn me here. In the parlor, I noticed an old piano covered in dust. I approached it, curious. As I brushed my fingers over the keys, I felt a cold breeze sweep through the room. The temperature dropped sharply and the lights on my camera flickered. Suddenly, a haunting melody began to play, the notes drifting through the air as if summoned by an unseen hand. Frozen in place, I watched as the keys moved on their own, playing a beautiful but sorrowful tune. "Lady Evelyn?" I whispered, hoping for a response. The music ceased abruptly, plunging the room into silence once more. My heart raced as I reached for my voice recorder. "If there's anyone here, please make your presence known," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. A chill swept through the room, and I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. As I played back the recording, I heard it, a faint whisper amidst the static. "Help me." The voice was soft, almost pleading. My pulse quickened. This was it. I had to know more. I decided to explore the upstairs, where the rumors said Lady Evelyn had spent her final moments. The staircase creaked ominously under my weight, each step a reminder of the manor's age and the secrets it held. As I reached the top, I found myself in a long hallway lined with closed doors. One door stood ajar at the end of the hall, a flickering light spilling out. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding. Pushing the door open, I was met with a bedroom frozen in time. The four-poster bed was draped in a tattered canopy and an ornate mirror hung above a dusty dresser. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. I spun around, and there she was, Lady Evelyn, her translucent figure glowing faintly in the dim light. Her once beautiful dress was tattered and faded, and her eyes held a mixture of sadness and longing. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice barely above a breath. "Lady Evelyn?" I stammered, taken aback by her ethereal beauty. "What happened to you?" She pointed toward the window, her gaze distant. "The storm, they took me." Her voice trembled, and I could see her anguish etched into her features. "I need you to find the truth." Before I could respond, the window rattled violently, as if caught in a tempest. The room darkened, shadows swirling around me. I felt a rush of cold air, and the once serene atmosphere shifted into chaos. The sound of thunder echoed outside, and the room trembled as if the very walls were alive with her sorrow. "Please, find the pendant," she cried, her form flickering. "It holds the key to my freedom." Just as quickly as she appeared, she vanished, leaving me alone in the darkened room. My mind raced. A pendant. Where could it be? I glanced around, desperate for a clue. On the dresser, I spotted a small jewelry box, intricately carved and covered in dust. With shaking hands, I opened the box. Inside, I found several pieces of jewelry, but one item stood out, a delicate silver pendant shaped like a teardrop, its surface etched with intricate patterns. I picked it up, feeling a surge of energy course through me. As soon as I held it, the room trembled, and the ghostly whispers returned, echoing through the air. "The truth," they urged. "You must discover the truth." I rushed back to the hallway, the pendant clutched tightly in my hand. I needed to know what had happened to Lady Evelyn. My mind raced back to the stories I had heard, the tales of betrayal, jealousy, and a forbidden love that had led to her demise. Descending the stairs, I made my way to the library where I knew I could find the history of Blackwood Manor. The air grew thick with tension as I scanned the shelves, searching for anything that might reveal the truth. Finally, I found a dusty old tome titled The Legacy of Blackwood. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered an entry about Lady Evelyn, a beautiful heiress who had fallen in love with a local artist, much to her family's disapproval. They had planned to elope, but on the night of their escape, a fierce storm had struck. Reading further, I learned that Evelyn's family had tried to keep her from leaving, leading to a tragic confrontation. In the chaos, her lover had been killed, and she had been locked away in the manor, left to mourn her loss until her spirit could bear it no longer. "Evelyn," I whispered, piecing together the tragic story. "They betrayed you." I felt the weight of her sorrow wash over me, and I knew what I had to do. I hurried back to the bedroom, clutching the pendant tightly. "Lady Evelyn," I called out, desperation in my voice. "I know what happened to you. I'm here to help you find peace." The room responded with a powerful gust of wind, and her spirit appeared before me once again, her eyes wide with hope. "You understand?" she asked, her voice filled with longing. "Yes, I know you were betrayed," I exclaimed, holding up the pendant. "I have the pendant. It belongs to you." As I extended my hand, the pendant began to glow, casting a warm light throughout the room. "You must return it to me," she urged, her form shimmering with energy. With a sense of purpose, I stepped closer and placed the pendant in her outstretched hand. The moment it made contact, a blinding light enveloped us, and I felt an overwhelming rush of emotions: grief, love, and finally peace. "Thank you," she whispered as the light intensified, her form becoming ethereal. "You've set me free." As the light faded, I felt a wave of calm wash over me. The room was still, and I realized that the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. I stood alone, knowing that Lady Evelyn Blackwood had finally found her peace after a century of sorrow. I made my way out of Blackwood Manor, the night air crisp and clear. The storm had passed, and the moon shone brightly overhead. I glanced back at the manor, now a silhouette against the starry sky, no longer a place of haunting, but a symbol of redemption. With a heavy heart, I left the past behind, knowing that some ghosts simply need to be understood to find their way home.
Story number 11.
It was a chilly October evening when I received an urgent message from my childhood friend, Lucy. "You have to come to Greystone Hollow," she typed, her words frantic and shaky. "Something is happening here." I hadn't been back to our hometown in years, especially not since the whispers of the Hollow's dark history had resurfaced, but I couldn't ignore her plea, so I packed a bag and made the long drive, the trees lining the road stripped bare, shivering under the weight of the cold wind. As I entered Greystone Hollow, an eerie fog wrapped around the town like a ghostly shroud. The street lamps flickered, casting shadows that danced ominously on the pavement. Lucy was waiting for me outside her family's old house, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "You came," she breathed, relief washing over her features. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would disturb whatever shadows lurked nearby. "It's about the old cemetery," she said, leading me inside. "I went there last night, and I swear I heard voices. I thought I was imagining it, but then I saw them." "Who?" I asked, trying to mask the growing dread in my chest. "The spirits," she replied, her voice trembling. "The spirits of the ones who were buried there. They're restless." I frowned. The cemetery at Greystone Hollow was notorious for the legends surrounding it. Stories of souls trapped between worlds, unable to move on due to the darkness that had plagued this town. Lucy pulled out a small journal. "Look at this," she said, flipping through the pages until she found the one she wanted. "This is what I found in my grandmother's attic. It belonged to her, and it talks about the old church that was here before the cemetery was established." I scanned the pages, which were filled with tales of a preacher who had performed dark rituals to bind the souls of the damned. "He believed he could control the dead," I murmured, feeling a chill run down my spine. "This is bad." Lucy nodded, her eyes glassy. "And there's more. People in town have been hearing strange sounds, and animals are disappearing. I don't think it's just coincidence." "Then we have to go to the cemetery," I said, determination bubbling up despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "We need to figure out what's happening." As dusk fell, we made our way to the cemetery, the moonlight filtering through the trees, casting long shadows that twisted and turned with every gust of wind. The cemetery gates creaked ominously as we pushed them open, and the air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The headstones loomed around us like sentinels, and a sense of foreboding settled over me. Lucy clutched my arm, her breath hitching as we ventured deeper into the graveyard. "I swear I heard them from over there." She pointed to a cluster of trees at the back. We moved cautiously, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the thick layer of fallen leaves. The atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an unsettling energy. Suddenly, a low, mournful wail echoed through the air, sending shivers down my spine. "Did you hear that?" Lucy whispered, her eyes wide with terror. I nodded, my heart racing. "We need to keep going." As we approached the trees, the wailing intensified, transforming into a chorus of anguished cries. "Help us! Set us free!" The voices pierced the night, sending a wave of dread coursing through my veins. We reached a clearing and stopped dead in our tracks. In front of us stood an ancient oak tree, its gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers against the moonlit sky. At its base lay a crumbling stone altar, overgrown with moss and weeds. I could feel the energy pulsing from it, dark and oppressive. "This is where the rituals took place," Lucy whispered, stepping closer to the altar. "I can feel it." Just then, the ground beneath us trembled, and the air crackled with energy. The voices grew louder, surrounding us, filling the night with their desperate cries. "We are trapped! Release us!" "Lucy, we need to leave," I shouted. But she was frozen in place, staring at the altar, her expression one of dawning realization. "I have to do something," she said, her voice distant. "I think the journal mentioned a way to help them." "Are you crazy?" I urged. "This isn't some fairy tale. We need to get out of here before." Before I could finish, Lucy knelt by the altar and pulled the journal from her bag. She began to read aloud, her voice trembling but steady. "Spirits of the lost, hear my plea. Bound by darkness, set yourselves free." As she recited the words, the ground shook violently and the wind howled around us, whipping through the trees like a raging storm. The spirit's wails crescendoed into a haunting melody that filled the air, vibrating in my bones. I could feel the temperature drop as an icy chill enveloped us. "Lucy, stop!" I screamed, grabbing her shoulder, but she wouldn't budge. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Help us!" the voices cried, the agony in their words palpable. Suddenly, the earth erupted before us, and dark figures began to rise from the ground, their spectral forms swirling like smoke. I stumbled back, my heart racing as I realized we had awoken something ancient and powerful. "Release us!" They screamed in unison, their faces twisted in pain and anger. I could see their eyes, hollow and sorrowful, filled with a longing for freedom. "Lucy!" I shouted, desperate. "You have to stop!" But she continued, her voice growing louder, more fervent. "Spirits of the lost, hear my plea. Bound by darkness, set yourselves free." With a final surge of energy, the spirits surged forward, swirling around us in a tempest of anguish. The air crackled with electricity, and the altar pulsed with dark energy. I felt the weight of their despair pressing down on me, threatening to consume us both. "Please," Lucy cried out, tears streaming down her face. "I just want to help you." And then, in a moment of clarity, I understood. This was a cycle of pain, a desperate plea for release. The spirits weren't just trapped, they were angry, and that anger was fueling the darkness in the hollow. "Lucy," I shouted, my voice breaking through the chaos. "We can help them, but we have to do it together." She looked at me, her expression torn. "But how?" "By acknowledging their pain and letting them go," I said, my heart pounding. "We need to offer them peace." Together, we began to chant, our voices rising above the cacophony. "We acknowledge your pain. We honor your suffering. You are not forgotten." As we spoke, the spirits hesitated, their forms flickering in the dim light. The oppressive energy began to lift, and the wails softened to a mournful whisper. "Let go," I urged, feeling the connection between us and the spirits. "You are free to move on." Slowly, their faces transformed from anguish to relief. One by one, they began to fade, their voices merging into a harmonious chorus. Thank you," they whispered, their gratitude echoing through the hollow. As the last spirit vanished, the air around us grew still, the heaviness lifting. Lucy and I collapsed to the ground, breathless and trembling. The night was silent, the oppressive energy replaced by a sense of peace. "We did it," Lucy gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. I nodded, feeling a sense of triumph wash over me. We freed them. As we made our way back through the cemetery, the fog began to lift, revealing the stars shining brightly overhead. Greystone Hollow, once a place of darkness, now felt lighter, almost alive with the memory of those we had released. We left the cemetery, knowing that we had not only helped the spirits of Greystone Hollow find peace, but had also strengthened our bond in the face of darkness. Sometimes it takes confronting the shadows to find the light. Story the end.
Story number 12.
The wind howled through the trees, a haunting sound that sent chills down my spine as I approached the old Ravenwood estate. I had always been drawn to abandoned places, but this one held a reputation that chilled even the most daring thrill-seekers. It was said that the ghost of Lady Isolde, the estate's last owner, roamed the halls searching for something or someone lost to time. I parked my car at the edge of the overgrown driveway and took a deep breath, steeling myself for the night ahead. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery light over the dilapidated mansion, illuminating the ivy-clad walls and shattered windows. I grabbed my flashlight, camera, and a voice recorder, eager to document whatever I might encounter. As I stepped inside, the door creaked ominously, revealing a grand foyer that had seen better days. Dust motes danced in the air, caught in the beam of my flashlight. The walls were adorned with faded portraits, their subjects seemingly watching my every move, their expressions frozen in time. I shuddered at the thought of the secrets they held. "Is anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing in the vast emptiness. Silence answered, heavy and oppressive. I wandered deeper into the estate, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floorboards, every creak sounding like a whisper of the past. In the parlor, I noticed an old piano, its keys yellowed and cracked. Curiosity tugged at me, and I approached it. As my fingers brushed the keys, a low, mournful note rang out, startling me. It felt as though the piano was responding to my presence, a call from the other side. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing my flashlight momentarily. I shivered, the temperature dropping significantly. When the light flickered back to life, I saw her, a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, her white dress flowing like mist around her. "Lady Isolde?" I stammered, my heart racing. The figure nodded slowly, her eyes sorrowful and filled with longing. "What do you seek?" she whispered, her voice ethereal and distant. I want to help you," I said, my voice trembling. "What do you need?" She pointed toward the grand staircase, her gaze piercing. "Find the locket," she urged, her voice growing fainter. "It holds my heart." Without thinking, I dashed up the staircase, my mind racing. The air felt thick with tension as I reached the second floor. I had to find this locket, whatever it was. As I moved through the rooms, I felt an unsettling presence watching me. In the master bedroom, the moonlight spilled through the shattered window, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the air. My eyes landed on a battered jewelry box sitting on a vanity, its lid slightly ajar. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding as I opened it. Inside lay several pieces of jewelry, but my gaze was drawn to a delicate silver locket nestled among them. I picked it up, the cool metal sending a jolt through me. It felt heavy with history, as if it contained not just memories but emotions trapped within. I opened the locket, revealing two miniature portraits, one of a young woman and the other of a handsome man with warm, kind eyes. My heart sank as I realized they were Lady Isolde and her lost love, a man who had met a tragic end. "Isolde," I murmured, the name lingering in the air. Suddenly the room darkened and the shadows around me deepened. A chilling wind swept through, and I felt a rush of energy enveloping me. The locket pulsed in my hand, and I knew I had to return it to her. I raced down the stairs, the locket clutched tightly in my palm. As I reached the parlor, Lady Isolde appeared before me once again, her form more solid, her expression one of desperate hope. "Please, give it to me," she implored, her voice echoing with emotion. I extended the locket toward her, my heart racing. "Isolde, this is yours." As she took it, the room filled with a warm, golden light. The air crackled with energy, and I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with gratitude. "Now I can finally rest." As the light enveloped her, I watched in awe as her form transformed into a brilliant glow, a smile of pure relief spreading across her face. In that moment, all the pain and sorrow that had lingered in the estate began to dissipate, replaced by an overwhelming sense of calm. With a final nod of appreciation, she faded into the light, leaving behind a soft whisper. "You have freed me." The air grew still, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as if a weight had been lifted from the estate. I stood alone in the parlor, the locket now a mere memory in my hand, but I could feel the echoes of Lady Isolde's presence lingering, a warm embrace that enveloped me. As I left Ravenwood Estate, the moon illuminated my path, the once haunting mansion now a peaceful silhouette against the night sky. The whispers of the past had finally found their rest, and I knew that I had played a part in setting them free. The world felt different as I drove away, the darkness receding and a sense of tranquility settling in its place. The legacy of Ravenwood would remain, but it was no longer a tale of sorrow. It was a story of release, of love enduring beyond the grave. Story the end.